Hello friends, welcome to another discussion on practical techniques that are largely involved in process metallurgy. So in this lecture, we will be looking into the proximate analysis of coal. So this proximate analysis in the context of process metallurgy is largely employed to understand certain features of coal. So that is what we will be looking into in this theoretical lecture. So even though of course it's a practical course, these lectures would again help you understand the theoretical foundation of these experimental techniques. Now, so far, whatever we have considered about coal has largely been restricted and oriented towards the definition of minerals. So if you could recollect, in our theoretical discussion on mineral processing, we attempted to define or distinguish mineral from all the other materials. So we distinguished mineral from rest of the substances that are present on the Earth's crust. So one way we distinguished these minerals, or one factor that we considered for distinguishing minerals from other materials that are found on the Earth's crust, is that we attributed or we asserted that the minerals are technically, they do not comprise of any dead plants or animals. So essentially they are inorganic compounds. However, coal in principle is made of dead plants. The reason why coal is considered or treated as a mineral is primarily because of its economic significance. And only due to this economic significance, we treat coal as a mineral. Since this proximate analysis is largely geared towards coal in the context of process metallurgy, it is vital for us to understand some basic aspects of coal. And therefore, before going into the analysis as a whole, we will try to understand some of the relevant aspects of coal. So one thing is clear, that is, technically coal will not be considered as a mineral, but purely given its economical significance, we treat that as a mineral. Now, when we consider the formation of the coal, it is well known, or you might have known about this fact, that coal is largely, it is formed from the dead plants. So the precursor for coal is nothing but the dead plants. Now, if you observe physically a dead plant, or let us consider, or for the sake of our discussion, let us restrict ourselves to a dead branch that is found on the surface of the earth. So supposing you go to your garden and you find a dead branch and you keep on observing it without discarding it, you keep on observing it, how this particular dead branch behaves, or how this particular dead branch transforms over days. So when you consider that dead branch, what you essentially observe is, as the days go on, the dead branch begins to lose its form. So initially, moments after it has broken off from its tree and fallen to the ground, initially it will be sturdy. And after a while, what would happen is this sturdiness begins to lose, and it begins to lose its form. And ultimately it becomes dry and it begins to disintegrate. So over a prolonged period of time, what actually happens is that this particular branch begins to disintegrate, and after even a prolonged period of time, essentially you would observe that there is no longer a branch but disintegrated pieces of the branch. So what was originally a branch now has been disintegrated. So what essentially happens is that, under the natural order of things, when you observe a dead tree or a dead branch, as we have considered now, what we essentially see is that the complex forms or the complex setups that originally constituted this branch begins to break up into simpler components, and ultimately they vanish off into the ground. So that this is the natural course of things. If you observe a dead branch on a ground and you let it as it is and you keep on observing it, what essentially would happen is this branch would disintegrate and completely disappear on the surface of the earth. The complex forms, or the complex structures that originally constituted this branch will break down into simpler components and they dissociate into the surface of the earth. So this can happen microbial techniques or microbial process might be involved in this disintegration, or it can be without any microbial interaction. Either way, what essentially happens is that the complex molecules or the complex setups that originally constituted this branch disintegrate into simpler forms, and they completely dissociate and disappear into the surface of the earth. However, if we let this natural process take its toll, essentially what you would end up with having a total deterioration of this dead tree or the branch. So this natural course needs to be interrupted for the formation of coal. So largely coal is being formed, or coals, they are formed by disruption of this natural course of thing. So you have a natural course of disintegration of the dead plants. So this natural course needs to be interrupted in order to lead to the formation of coal. So what we mean by the disruption of this natural process is that, so when we want to have the formation of coal, or when the coal needs to be formed, of course, as a natural process. So during the formation of coal, what essentially happens is that the large amount of a greater degree of these particular dead plants, they are segregated and they are buried under a thick inorganic sediments. So essentially what we mean by these technical terms, that is thick inorganic sediments, essentially is that instead of allowing the dead plants or the branches undertake the natural process of disintegration, what essentially happens is the nature again intervenes due to some catastrophic events, and these large amount of dead plants or branches, what essentially happen is that they get buried under the surface of the earth. So the surface of the earth, that is largely comprising of inorganic substances, it buries or it consumes the dead plants or the plants which will ultimately be dead once it's been buried. So what essentially now you have is, instead of these dead branches or the trees, instead of being available at the surface of the earth, is now buried under the thick inorganic sediments. Now essentially when you have a thick inorganic sediments, you have a overhead weight on you are essentially imposing an overhead weight on these dead plants. So this overhead weight technically is nothing but you are imposing a significant amount of pressure on these dead plants. So instead of allowing the plants to naturally dissociate, decompose and disintegrate, we are now putting it under, or what naturally happens is that during the formation of the coal, what naturally happens is that the dead plants, they are buried under a thick inorganic sediments, and now because of the weight of the thick inorganic sediments, it translates into the pressure and it keeps on acting on this dead plants. And in addition to the pressure, there is also a temperature associated with it. So you have a thick sediment of inorganic substances, and because of the thick sediments, now you have a pressure acting on these dead plants, and because of this position of these dead plants on the crust, there is also a temperature difference. There is an increased temperature in this region wherein the dead plants are now being compressed by this thick inorganic sediments, and in combination of this pressure and the temperature, which are largely due to the thick inorganic sediments, this dead plants, what essentially happens to these dead plants is that they get chemically altered, and this is what essentially leads to the formation of coal. So what happens is that instead of a dead plant or a branch, in our case, instead of allowing it to be completely disintegrated and get dissociated into and become a part of the earth's crust, in order to have this particular plant to be transformed into coal, what essentially we need to do is we need to disrupt this natural process and allow this particular dead plant to get into a section of the earth crust which has a thick inorganic sediment above it. And when you have a thick inorganic sediment, you alter the environment surrounding the dead plants. So essentially you alter the pressure surrounding it, and also you increase the temperature surrounding it. And because of this combination of high pressure and temperature, what you have is a chemical alteration that is occurring on this dead plants, which after a prolonged period of time, or comparatively very much prolonged period of time, transforms this dead plants into coal. So this is how the coal comes into being. The reason one needs to consider about this particular formation of coal, why we need to consider the formation of coal or the process that are involved in the formation of coal, is because the the feature of a coal, supposing you excavate or you extract or you excavate, you mine out certain coal, the properties that are associated with the coal, the nature of this coal is governed by several factors, because we saw the coal is formed because and the reason we have the formation of coal is because you have a thick inorganic sediment above it, and this inorganic sediment translates itself to the pressure that is imposed and also the temperature that is imposed on these dead plants. And the magnitude or the amount of thick inorganic sediments above this dead plants is not same everywhere, so that might vary. Correspondingly, the pressure might vary and also the temperature surrounding it might vary. So when you consider coal on the earth crust, what you notice is that this coal, the properties or the features of this coal vary differently when compared to one region to another region. Supposing in a given region you excavate a coal or you mine out a coal, the nature or the feature of this coal is significantly different from the coal that you excavate elsewhere. The reason for it is because the formation of the coal is not a straightforward process. It is dependent on the thickness or the amount of sediment that is above it, the nature of the sediment that is above it, the nature of the inorganic sediment that is that contributes to the formation of the coal, the thickness of the sediment that contributes to the formation of the coal, the pressure and the temperature that is involved in the formation of the coal. And on top of it, the plantations, the plants that ultimately, the dead trees and plants that ultimately translate to coal, they also play a key role in the nature and the properties of the coal. So you have several features along with the features that are involved in the formation of the coal, like pressure, temperature and the amount of inorganic sediments. Along with that, the nature of the plants themselves also influence the properties or the feature of the coal. So therefore, what you essentially have is a varied properties or varied nature of coal depending on the region where you excavate it. And therefore, whenever you want to study a particular property of the coal, we need to understand that this particular property is not a definite. So it's not like what we saw in case of minerals. We defined minerals as a chemical or an inorganic compound with definite chemical composition. Unlike the technical minerals, what we essentially have in case of coal is there is no definite composition. So depending on all these features, beginning with the nature of the dead plants that are involved and the different factors involving pressure and temperature, which are largely governed by the sediments that are above these dead plants, all these features, they dictate the properties of the coal. So therefore, coal, it does not exhibit a definite chemical composition, and this in this way it is also significantly different from minerals. So when you have a substance, a mineral, again from an economical standpoint, when you have a mineral that does not have a definite chemical composition, then it becomes highly difficult for us to adopt a conventional technique to understand its chemical composition. And even if we try to understand its chemical composition, depending on the section or depending on the place you are, or depending on the coal that you consider, the chemical composition would significantly different. So we won't be able to have a unifying set of composition to distinguish coal. So therefore, different approaches are being taken in order to understand the properties of the coal. So conventional technique cannot be adopted to understand the chemical features or the chemical composition of the coal, because the chemical composition or the feature of the coal as a whole, the nature of a coal as a whole, is dependent on several factors. So if you take the generalized conventional approach of analyzing the chemical composition of a coal, what you will end up having is a wide range of chemical composition that is not consistent with one another. So the coal, the chemical composition of the coal excavated in India might not be the same as the one excavated, say, in Afghanistan, or say in somewhere, say Australia. So what essentially would then have, what we would have is a significant difference in the chemical composition. The range are widely varying, and essentially we won't be able to have a single way of, universal way of talking about coal, a universal way of discussing coal. And therefore we need to consider an approach that is quite different from the conventional approach that we are adopting. Now again, so this approach, the way we need to understand the composition or the feature of the coal should be different from the conventional approach. However, it needs to serve a practical purpose. So basically, the whole purpose of having a coal in the category of mineral is largely because of its economical significance. And since we are largely focused on more than the technicality of the coal, since we are largely focused on the practical purpose of the coal, the analysis to understand, to distinguish, or to say this particular coal is different from this particular coal, the approach that we take also is of practical use. We will not be getting into this particular way of analyzing the coal is not for purely a technical purpose. It is not to precisely understand the chemical composition of the coal, but rather it is purely a practical approach. The reason for taking a practical approach is because we want to distinguish one category of coal from another. And we want to say what is the amount of resource that we can, or what is the usage of this coal. How can we calculate or quantify the efficiency of this particular category of coal, and how much resources can we feed in, or how much monetary investment can we make in order to economically excavate this coal. So in order to do that, in order to compare the different forms of coal, in order to have an optimal usage of resources for all these purposes, purely from a practical purposes, we want to know the different features or the different properties or the chemical composition of the coal. Again, when we say chemical composition in the context of coal, it is not precise composition of individual elements that are being involved. In the context of coal, what we want to do is largely differentiate or distinguish one coal from another, and we also want to quantify how rich this coal is when compared to other, how much resourceful is this coal when compared to other. So what are these factors that we can, or what are the ways in which we can distinguish it, and what are the ways we can rather grade the different forms of coal, and also what are the ways in which we can see which coal is rather more efficient or more worthy than the other. So for this reason, we want to differentiate. For this practical purposes, we want to identify the chemical composition of the coal. Again, not the weightage of individual elements that are involved like we conventionally do, but for purely practical purpose. We just want to distinguish different forms of coal, and we want to say which one is rather a high grade one and which one is a rather low grade one. So there is no point in investing a huge amount of monetary resources in excavating low grade ones. So in order to make these economical decisions, in order to make these practical decisions, we want to distinguish coals, and we want to take or adapt or devise a technique that will enable us to distinguish the different coals. So that is what we will be considering in this technique. Now, when we want to distinguish coals, we saw that using a conventional technique, distinguishing the chemical composition of the coals largely based on the elements that are involved is rather redundant, because the chemical composition, they vary depending on the several techniques that are involved in the formation of coals. So therefore, we need to replace the technique of understanding or the way of expressing the chemical composition in terms of element. We want to, in terms of elements, which we usually do for any other conventional test, we want to replace that approach with some other approach for coal. So in order to do that, what we essentially consider is, we consider specific components of coal. So what we mean by that is, supposing you have an alloy, you want to talk about its chemical composition. You would express this chemical composition in terms of the alloying elements, the weight percentage of the alloying elements present in that alloy. However, such treatment cannot be adapted for coal, because each coal has its own chemical composition. So that the approach would be is not practical. So in order to take a practical approach, we have realized certain contents that are common all through the coal, and using these contents we have to consider the difference in the distribution of the contents in order to distinguish one coal from another. So the alloying elements in a conventional technique, the elements in the conventional technique that helps us distinguish the chemical composition, that helps us in quantifying the chemical composition, is now replaced with specific contents in coal. So whenever we are talking about the chemical composition or chemical analysis of coal, we will not be considering individual elements that are involved, but rather specific contents that are involved in this coal. So let us see first what are these specific contents that constitute a coal, or that is of practical relevance to a coal. So this practical contents that of relevance to the practical element of coal, relevance of coal, these specific contents they are ascertained by the proximate analysis that we are considering in this lecture. So before considering or before looking into the different contents that serve as or that replace the elements in conventional technique, before getting into what these specific contents are, we need to understand that in this lecture, the proximate analysis that we are studying or that we will be looking into is the equivalence of the technique that we conventionally use to calculate the chemical composition of an alloy. So when you have an alloy, you want to ascertain its chemical composition, you go for a conventional technique. Now, in case of coal, when you want to know for its practical purpose the chemical composition of it, the chemical nature of it, we adapt this proximate analysis. So proximate analysis in case of coal is essentially a chemical analysis that helps us understand the chemical composition of the coal. Again, this is for practical purpose. Therefore, instead of considering the individual elements that are involved in the coal, what this proximate analysis considers is the specific constants of the coal. So these specific contents, the way we realize the specific contents or way we identify the specific contents are, these should be present in all coals, irrespective of where you mine it. These contents should be present in all coals, and depending on this distribution, we will be able to differentiate one form of coal from another. So the way these specific contents that replace alloying element in coal, or this specific content that is of high practical relevance in coal, they are realized by considering that these contents should be present in all forms of coal, and only thing that should distinguish each other is the distribution of it. So one of this specific content is moisture. So moisture or the form of water that is present in the coal. So this moisture can be present as a regular water in between the cracks or in between the holes. So these are often referred to as the superficial moisture. So the superficial moisture or one form of moisture that are present in the coal is some sort of a regular water. Again, like I said, in between the cavities, between the cracks, whatever water you find, or is a part of the content that is of practical relevance to us, and that we categorize as moisture. And this we refer to as the superficial moisture because this is found as water itself. The other form of moisture that is present in the coal is physically observed water. So these are not visually seen, but they are observed in the coal that we are about to study. So the vapor pressure when compared to the actual water might be different because they are physically observed into the coal. So when you consider the contents of the coal and that are present universally and that help us distinguish one coal from another, one of the specific content or the first content that we need to consider is the moisture content. So the moisture content, it is present universally in all forms of coal, it is present, and the distribution varies with the different coals. So it can be used to distinguish one coal from another because it is present in all forms of coal. The other content that is also present in different forms of coal is the volatile matter. So this volatile matter that is present universally in all coals, it comprises of the hydrocarbons that are the part of the coal, and the carbon dioxide and monoxide, and additionally we have chemically observed water. So apart from moisture, there is also volatile matter that is present in the coal. So these volatile matter, they are present in the form of hydrocarbons, and they manifest themselves in the form of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. So even though these are rather straightforward to perceive, the chemically observed water also is a form of volatile matter that is observed in the coal. So meaning, when you want to understand or when you want to analyze the volatile matter in a coal, you would realize that certain water content is released while analyzing the volatile matter in the coal. So this water amount or this moisture content that is observed while analyzing the volatile matter is chemically observed in the coal, and that is what we refer to as the chemically observed water. So essentially what we mean is that you are operating on a coal and you are operating on a level wherein there should not be any water present because all the water should evaporate at 100 degrees Celsius. Now you are essentially operating at another 50 degrees Celsius, but at this high temperature you observe that there is a water content that is being emanated by the coal. So this water content is emanated along with the other volatile substances, and they come about because they were chemically observed. So therefore, this chemically observed water content, they are categorized as the volatile matter. So they are categorized as the volatile matter in the while considering the proximate analysis of the coal or chemical analysis of the coal. These water content that are released above the boiling temperature of water, very much above the boiling temperature of the water, they are chemically observed coal and they are categorized under the volatile matter. The other content that is universally observed in coal is the ash. That is nothing but the residue that you observe when your coal is totally incinerated. So you use up the entire amount of coal, you burn it thoroughly, and the amount of residue that is left, or the ultimate residue that is left, we refer to it as the coal. So these are the three contents. So far we have considered three contents that are found in all coals that can be, or the distribution can be used to distinguish one coal from another. So these are the three specific contents. So finally, one specific content that helps us distinguish the coal is the fixed carbon percentage. So even though according to the conventional technique, we won't be calculating this fixed carbon present in a given coal, the fixed carbon can be calculated from rest of this contents. So we have seen moisture being a part of the coal, volatile matter being a part of the coal, and the ash, that is the residual of the coal. By estimating the amount of the moisture content, estimating the amount of volatile matter, and finally calculating the amount of ash, we will be able to ascertain this fixed carbon. So what we now have is different contents that are present in all forms of coal. However, the distribution of these contents vary depending on the coal. So therefore, these contents can be employed to distinguish coal and also to grade them. So therefore, these contents, they replace elements in the chemical composition of the coal. So essentially, proximate analysis is equivalent to the chemical analysis of alloy. So when you want to understand the chemical composition of alloy, you go for a specific approach. When you want to understand the chemical composition of coal, you go for proximate analysis. And in proximate analysis, you won't be considering individual elements, but rather specific contents, and these are the specific contents. You calculate the amount of moisture, you calculate the amount of volatile matter or volatile substance that is present in the coal, and also you calculate the amount of ash. And after calculating all this, after experimentally determining all this, you ultimately calculate the fixed carbon in this coal. And these are the contents that are universally present in all these coal, and depending on the distribution of these contents in a given coal, we will be able to ascertain its grade. So is it a low grade or high grade? Based on these contents, we can ascertain it, and we can also know the value of the coal, and we can also distinguish one form of the coal from another technically. Now, this is where the proximate analysis comes into play. The proximate analysis, like I said, it does not consider the individual elements, but rather considers the amount or the distribution, or calculates the distribution of these specific contents. Now, the proximate analysis, if you consider the nature of the proximate analysis, it is a thermogravimetric technique. So when you want to categorize or place the proximate analysis in the overall scheme of techniques that are conventionally used, the proximate analysis forms a section of techniques or a section of analysis that is referred to as the thermogravimetric technique. So as the name indicates, thermogravimetric, the proximate analysis involves temperature and a role of gravity. So proximate analysis is commonly, or it is a form of a thermogravimetric analysis. So thermogravimetric analysis generally involves combination of two factors. One is thermo, that is temperature, and the other is gravimetry, meaning something that is has to do with the influence of gravitation. So when you want to consider the influence of gravitation, the easiest influence of gravitation is in the weight of the substance. So you have mass and you multiply it with gravitation, you have the weight. So essentially, then when you want to talk about the gravimetry or the influence of gravity, it is nothing but weight. So essentially, what thermogravimetry or the proximate analysis as a thermogravimetric technique involves is that we raise the temperature of the coal and we see the change in the weight of the coal. So proximate analysis in the form of thermogravimetric technique is used to analyze coal by heating it to higher temperatures and seeing how much weight loss, or measuring how much weight loss is exhibited by the coal. So that is all we will be doing in the proximate analysis. So proximate analysis, two aspects are involved, thermal and gravimetry. So you have the high temperature and the weight loss. So you raise the temperature of the coal and you calculate how much weight loss is there. And based on the amount of weight loss, you calculate the distribution of the different contents that are involved. So there are numerous ways of doing it, and we usually follow a definite standard, and the specification of the standard is being shown here. So it is ASTM D3173-73 and so on and so forth. So this is the specific standard that we follow in order to calculate the distribution of the content or the different specific contents that we saw for the coal. Now, in order to calculate these contents, the coal is initially grounded, so it's being broken down into finer particles, and then the proximate analysis is conducted. So before raising the temperature of the coal and before measuring its weight loss, the initial step involves comminution, nothing but the fragmenting the larger coal into smaller pieces. So once you have fragmented it, once you have considered the smaller pieces of the coal, you initially weigh it. So you initially determine the weight of the coal, and then you begin the process. So once you have initially determined the weight of the coal, then you begin to increase the temperature of the coal. So according to the standards we follow, we increase the temperature to the temperature mentioned here. So we increase the temperature to the specific temperature and hold it for 1 hour. And now this particular analysis, or this particular aspect of the proximate analysis, which is directed towards understanding or calculating the moisture content, is ideally conducted in an inert environment or in an inert atmosphere, which usually comprises of pure nitrogen. So when you want to calculate the amount of moisture content that is present in a coal, you raise the temperature of the comminuted or the fragmented coal to this temperature here, 107 degrees Celsius, give or take 4 degrees Celsius, and you maintain the temperature for 1 hour, and you will not be doing it in a regular environment but in an inert environment with pure nitrogen in it. And during this process, while heating the coal and while holding the coal for this particular temperature, you will calculate the amount of weight that is lost by the coal, and from that you will ascertain the moisture content in the coal. So when you want to calculate the moisture content in the coal, essentially you will be rating it to a specific temperature in a specific environment for a specific period of time. The temperature you will be holding it for a specific period of time, and depending on the amount of mass or the amount of weight the coal loses during this treatment, you will translate it to the moisture content of the coal. And once you have ascertained the moisture content of the coal, after holding it for this particular temperature for this period of time in the inert environment, you further increase the temperature to 950 degrees Celsius, of course with the level of tolerance, and you hold it just for 7 minutes at this temperature, again in the inert environment. So after understanding or after calculating the weight loss during the lower temperature and a prolonged period of time in the inert environment, you increase the temperature to 950 degrees Celsius and you hold it just for 7 minutes, and you, without changing the environment, without introducing any air, without contaminating the environment, you continue to have an inert environment, but you raise the temperature and hold it for a little duration of time, and then you calculate the weight loss, and this weight loss is translated to the volatile matter content. For calculating the moisture content, you hold it to close to 100 degrees Celsius for a prolonged period of time in an inert environment. To calculate the volatile matter, the time is significantly reduced. The inert atmosphere continues to be pure nitrogen in most cases. However, the temperature is significantly raised. And by calculating the weight loss during this analysis, it is translated to the volatile matter content. And finally, in order to calculate the ash, you replace the inert atmosphere with the common air, and then you reduce the temperature to 750 or 725 degrees Celsius along with the tolerance, and then you allow the coal to completely incinerate. And when you do that, when you allow the coal to completely incinerate and you allow the coal ultimately to settle down as ash, you then measure the residual and you translate into the ash content. So essentially, when you are conducting approximate analysis, you are essentially calculating 3 contents, and these 3 contents you are calculating by considering the weight loss and the weight. So when you are doing or ascertaining the content of moisture, you are considering the weight loss at 107 degrees Celsius for a 1 hour in an inert atmosphere. So you are raising your coal to that particular temperature, that is 107 degrees Celsius, and you are holding it for 1 hour, and then the weight loss is being translated to the amount of moisture content. And similarly, to ascertain the volatile matter, you are raising it to an even higher temperature, a very high temperature of 950 degrees Celsius, and then you are holding it for a small period of time, that is 7 minutes, again in an inert atmosphere, and then you are calculating, essentially what you are calculating is the weight loss. So in all these cases you are calculating the weight loss, and then you are translating it to the amount of volatile matter. Finally, when you want to calculate the amount of ash that is present, you are reducing the temperature when compared to the calculation of volatile matter to 725 degrees Celsius. Now you are replacing the air or replacing the inert atmosphere with regular air, which is rich in oxygen relatively, and then you allow the coal to completely incinerate, and then you measure the amount of ash that is present and translate it to its content. So having identified the moisture content, volatile matter, and the amount of ash that is present, you ultimately calculate the fixed carbon that is present in the coal. So essentially what we have seen is that when you are considering or when you want to calculate the chemical properties or the chemical composition or a chemical feature of a coal, you will not be able to do it in a conventional manner, because that would be rather involving a wide range of chemical substances, and they will not be exhibit a definite composition. This is largely because of the way coal is being formed. So therefore you need to take an alternate approach. So in this alternate approach, what we take to ascertain the chemical features of the coal is what we refer to as the proximate analysis. And this proximate analysis, what it does is, instead of considering individual elements, instead of defining the chemical composition of the coal based on individual elements, this proximate analysis, it distinguishes different coals by considering specific contents. So these contents, they are determined. So these contents are they are not randomly identified, they are identified by certain principles. So these principles involve that these constants should be present in all the different coals that are available on the earth crust. However, there should be a difference in the distribution of these constants, or the magnitude of these contents. There should be a difference. However, they should be present universally in all the coal that is present on the earth crust. So when we have this condition, and then when we look into the composition of the coal, we are able to identify 4 different contents. So these 4 different contents, they include the moisture content, volatile matter, ash, and fixed carbon. And now, using the proximate analysis, we essentially ascertain 3 of these 4 contents. That is, we ascertain the amount of volatile matter, which is found here, and we also ascertain the amount of moisture content, which is found here, and we also ascertain the amount of volatile matter, which is found here, and finally we are able to ascertain the amount of ash that is present in the coal. So after ascertaining all these 3 contents, what we essentially do is, using this relation here, the straightforward relation here, we ultimately find the amount of 4th content. So once we have now quantified the distribution of these 4 different contents, the amount of these 4 different contents that are present, then based on the amount of these 4 different contents, we will be able to distinguish one form of a coal from another. We will be able to grade the different coals that are available to us. So essentially, the bottom line is, proximate analysis is equivalent to the chemical analysis of any alloy, but proximate analysis is for coal. Instead of considering individual alloying elements, we consider different contents, and we measure it through the thermogravimetric analysis, meaning we raise the temperature and calculate the weight loss, and by doing so we estimate the amount of different contents that are present, and these contents include moisture, volatile matter, ash, and finally the fixed carbon. And once we are able to identify the amount of these different contents that are present, it will help us to distinguish the different forms of coal and know the worth or know the grade of each of these coal. So this is all that we will be doing while considering the practical or while conducting a proximate analysis of a coal. So these are the theoretical backups that you need to understand while proceeding with the proximate analysis of coal. Cool. So with this, I will wind up this lecture. We will see ourselves in the next lecture, wherein we will be considering another practical technique. Goodbye.